Now, on top of this, interwoven into Saturn's transits, interwoven into Nisargika Dasha, are the maturation ages of the planets and the nodes. Graha maturity also flowers through the positions of the planets in a chart. The expected fruit of a planet's position will emerge while the person's childish inclinations towards that planet decline. The person really comes into how this planet is supposed to operate at the time of its maturation. Now, truly, let me just see if you guys can see me here. Truly, the sun is an important period, an important maturation. Really, they're all important, but it's not until Mars matures at 28 that these maturities happen to happen at like neck-breaking points, like real neck turn points in the life. 28 is also when the Saturn return occurs, and there's also a nodal shift at that time, I believe. Same thing with 32, same thing with 36. 36, 43, and 48 are the big ones. Even 28 is big too. These are key years that we're going to see in the larger chart where many things are falling in at the same time. 28, 36, 43, and 48. Particularly 36, 43, and 48, there's a very important maturation process. Now, I couldn't really find, there's not much with regards to the reading that I've done, which I can point to a scriptural text regarding these maturations, but like ancient Jyotish authors, usually what that means is that either the thing is, a cultural stipulation that might not have real deep roots, or it's so systemic to Jyotish that it's written by various authors and no single author claims it. And this is one of those things. The maturations of the grahas are very well known all throughout Jyotish. Everyone knows about them. So it's one of those ubiquitous, important aspects of Jyotish and the evolutionary script. So a planet becomes mature and loses its childlike inclinations during the year of its maturation. And again, most of these are subtle up to the age of 28. Mars is significant, where undue aggression subsides, and this correlates with the first Saturn return. There's the person loses a lot of the aggression of being a 20-year-old when Mars matures, and you can almost see it in the person. There's a lightness that gets applied to them. Even more lightness comes at 32 when Mercury matures and the person stops being stupid with their money, comparatively speaking. This brings financial and energetic savvy towards debt and one's energetic investments. We start thinking maturely, and of course this at 32, Mercury matures. This correlates also with the Jupiter period coming on. There's, again, a seriousness. Like, I want to use my money in order to further the interests that actually mean something to me. That's what happens at 32. At 36, Saturn matures, and this is another very key age. Some important lessons occur regarding healthy limits, using resources, and help wisely at this time. It comes down to paying off debt, completing karma. The houses that Saturn rules become unlocked. That's the houses that Capricorn and Aquarius rule, depending on the rising sign. Saturn's natal house and sign, and its aspect, and its yogas, this becomes sort of unlocked at the age of 36, where it becomes fully into play. And we effectively become an adult at 36 years old. Of course, there's also a nodal return, the second nodal return that happens at this time, as well as our third Jupiter return. And there's usually around 35 up to the point of 36. We usually get slammed with karma, whether it's debt, some kind of pressure gets put on us at 36. around 35. And it's up to 36 when, through the pressure that karma comes to us at this time, we learn what is pressure worth taking on and what is needless pressure that is not serving me. Because a lot of the times we take on pressure, we take on things, we say yes to things that don't actually further our spirit and soul in person, right? So this happens all the time. You got to learn your nose in order to make good use of Saturn. And I don't mean your thing, your olfactory nose. I mean your nose. Learn to say no. It's a very important thing when it comes to Saturn, right? And of course, the Rahu and Ketu maturation are very, very, very key dimensions of every reading in some ways, you know, especially if I'm going to be, you know, if I'm counseling someone 36 or older, I'm going to mention that they're made it to 36 and there's an important period happening. And then I'm going to tell them you got big fish to fry coming in your 40s. The midlife crisis period that everybody knows and hears about. There's a lot of things that happen in your 40s that completely shift, chuck the game. Completely sideways, completely rewind, rewire who you are, who you thought you were, who you wanted to be. Karma comes as well as internal realizations that force inner movement come as well. So our Rahu maturation is the first to occur in terms of, in terms of these maturations. We have Rahu maturing at 43, and we have Ketu maturing at 48. The Rahu maturation is a very key time. It really unlocks and unfolds this midlife crisis theme of your 40s. And in my neo-Vedic opinion, the maturation of the nodes has a lot more to do with your midlife crisis than Uranus, the Uranus opposition does. Although the two do occur simultaneously and they do stack. But Rahu is simply more of a load-bearing wall in everyone's evolutionary process than Uranus is. That comes from evolutionary astrology as well as Jyotish, although Jyotish doesn't talk about Uranus. But even in evolutionary astrology of Jeffrey Wolf Green, the nodes are considered more of an evolutionary backbone than anything at some level, bar Pluto. Pluto is very important to Jeffrey Wolf Green. I digress. Now, you'll often hear me say when I'm doing my cold readings, or if you've done a reading with me, that in a lot of ways, Rahu and Ketu are the heart of evolutionary soul astrology. Let that sink in. I did a great video with Timothy Halloran of Rasa Leela Healing on the subject of the nodes, and I recommend that video. I recommend his channel in general. He's a beautiful soul and smart dude. And he does a lot of work with the nodes because the nodes are, as he often describes it, through his training with evolutionary astrology, the nodes of the moon especially represent an aspect of our feeling, you know, and it's our feelings that are the energy that we experience on this planet. That's why the moon is so important. The sun is this eternal thing. It's the same old soul it's always been. But the moon's movements are what we actually experience. And they are the sliver, the crescent of meaning for what karma means in this moment, in relation to eternity. But we can't relate to eternity except through what we're feeling right now. This is why the moon and the nodes are the most important data to look at in astrology. Take it from me, take it however you want to hear it, but put that one in your hat and digest it. Now, like I said, I'm going to do more about these nodal transits and the maturation of the nodes in a separate video. But to really squeeze it together, Ketu is really the root, the emotional root, the soul root. It's the subliminal emotional fortress that we're born into through past lives. And we think we've mastered it. We think that we've gotten so much of this thing when we were young and in our past lives that we're so close to it that it's smoky and misty. So we evolve Ketu through this life, brings us through the opposite wisdom and lessons of Rahu, to peel back the psychic attachment we have to the false ideal of what Ketu is. Essentially, with Ketu, it's such a basic part of our emotional security paradigm that we need whatever's happening with Ketu, wherever Ketu's lord is, whatever sign, whatever planets it's touching, whatever house it's in. These things all represent a deeply key emotional security paradigm that we need to figure out first in order for us to have the energy to live effectively. If we don't have things related to Ketu in our sign and house, we're not really going to be able to operate at our most functional. I'm here, you guys see me doing this YouTube video. I got Ketu in Cancer. If my whole family died and everyone I loved died right now, I would not be here happy, smiling, being able to put in energy into doing this thing. So I need that Ketu in Cancer energy in order to survive. So let's see what happens in my 40s when things change. I'm only 32 at the time of this video. I digress. We often will surround ourselves with the illusion or with the feeling of what we need from that security of Ketu. But we are like, Ernst Wilhelm describes it as like you're in this fortress and you're trying to keep your fortress, you're trying to rule your fortress with kind of like an iron fist to keep everything tight and functional. And just over the hill, just over yonder, there could be gold in them hills. But we never go and see it because we're trying so hard to operate on the way we're used to operating our fortress. Rahu comes into our lives and forces us through curiosity. We're going to talk about Apu, the little monkey in Aladdin, who goes and tries to grab the ruby from Jafar's cave, and he's just risking his life. He needs to get the ruby. That's Rahu. Rahu is going to occasionally come into our lives, especially at the nodal returns, at 18 years old, at 36 years old, at 54 years old. Yeah. And but especially during the Rahu maturation. And Rahu completes Ketu. We think we've mastered Ketu. And that's why Ketu, its sign, its house, the planets associated with it, and its lord. Things related to Ketu are the one central piece of furniture we never think to look under in our emotional healing journey, although it may be central in our lives. It's very central to us. The Rahu maturation at 43 years old forces us through fate and a midlife crisis-like urgency to explore who we have never allowed ourselves to be, to explore who we really are now that we feel death's cold, hollow breath beaming on us from the other side of time. We've been pretending we are secure where Ketu is in order to survive well enough, to do it enough to let us get by and live our material lives. But now Rahu maturation comes in. And what happens, it's like Apu, if you've ever seen the Alladin movie. The little tiny monkey guy, he is with Alladin and they go into this cave. And there's a red ruby at the center of this cave. And he wants to go and grab it so bad. And Alladin says, no, I don't think this is a good idea. But Apu's like, oh, but the ruby, I need it. I want to grab it. And he grabs it. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose inside of this cave. And it's like, oh, whoops. But the monkey risks it all to get that Rahu, to get that thing that it's never gotten, and to embody Rahu. We must release our Ketu illusions that we've built up in order to do so. It is King surrendering our... I don't know what I've written in my notes here. Fortunately, sometimes my writing's a little weird, but it's surrendering our false security and comfort, risking and surrendering our false security and comfort in this paradigm that this imaginary paradigm that we've built over Ketu. We have to let it go in order to feel what Ketu really means to us. And this happens in our 40s. This leads to Ketu and its raw, painful truth and healthy limitations emerging. Ketu is a narrow gate, and we fight it. We resist thinking that we have a soul that has a specific fate for us. And then Ketu comes in and says, surprise, the soul has form. So that is the nature of the nodes maturing, and those maturations are an extremely important time, and this is one of the huge key aspects of the 40-year-old life cycle. Now, of course, the evolutionary nodes cycling in their transits is also this will be the 4th evolutionary arc. This is something that I'm going to